The pixel density readings spike as I run my scanner across the mural's lower left corner, and I know immediately that something's wrong. I am speaking from 2350, 329 years after your time, and I'm standing in the abandoned wing of the Meridian Cultural Archive, where the soft hum of climate control is the only sound breaking the silence. My hands are shaking as I write this, not from the cold, but from what I've just uncovered. The mural stretches 15 meters across the wall, depicting what the placard calls, Industrial Harmony, 2089. Standard corporate propaganda from your era's aftermath, smokestacks crowned with halos, workers with beatific smiles, that sort of sanitized historical revision. I've decoded hundreds of these pieces over the past decade. It's routine work, really. Art from the early 22nd century often contains embedded data streams, usually mundane archive material or artist signatures. The gallery's automated security system logged my entry at 1447, same as always. Scan, decode, catalog, move on. But this one fought back. The scanner, think of it like a microscopic metal detector that reads information instead of finding coins, kept hitting resistance layers I'd never encountered. Each pixel cluster contained not just color data, but compressed files wrapped in encryption so sophisticated it made my teeth ache. I should have logged it as anomalous and moved to the next piece. That's protocol. That's what keeps art data decoders like me employed and breathing. Instead, I touched the wall. The surface felt warm, almost organic, like skin that had been holding its breath for centuries. The moment my palm made contact, my neural interface exploded with data streams. Not the gentle trickle of embedded artist notes I was expecting, but a torrential flood of corporate communications, legal documents, and what I can only describe as digital screaming. I yanked my hand back, but it was too late. The files were already downloading directly into my cortex, bypassing every security protocol I had installed. Financial records from Hegemony Industries, internal memos discussing acceptable casualty thresholds, and video testimony from people who were supposed to be dead. All of it timestamped from 2087 to 2089, the years of the Great Purification, when the corporate tribunal supposedly brought justice to the ecological criminals of your century. The climate control system's hum seemed to grow louder, more insistent, as if the building itself was trying to warn me. I could taste copper in my mouth, a side effect of rapid neural data absorption that usually only happens when you're downloading something massive and dangerous. My legs felt like water as the implications hit me. The tribunals weren't justice. They were theater. A carefully orchestrated show trial designed to satisfy public rage while protecting the real architects of environmental collapse. And some artist working in 2089, had embedded the proof in this mural, hiding it in plain sight for over 2 centuries. I'm alone in this gallery wing, surrounded by the ghosts of sanitized history, holding evidence that could shatter the foundational myths of our entire civilization. The automated security system thinks I'm just doing my job, cataloging another piece of decorative propaganda. But I can feel the weight of those compressed files burning in my neural storage like swallowed fire. The smart thing would be to delete everything and pretend this never happened. Report the mural as corrupted data and recommend it for disposal. Go home to my efficiency pod, eat my protein rations, and continue living in a world where the corporate tribunals were heroes who saved us from environmental collapse. But I can't unsee what I've seen. Can't unfeel the desperation of whoever embedded these files, knowing they were creating a time bomb of truth that might never detonate. The mural stares back at me, its painted workers still smiling their empty smiles, while beneath the surface, the real story writhes like something alive. I need to tell someone. I need to tell you. The pattern emerged like a fever dream breaking through sedatives. I'd been staring at this mural for 3 hours, my neural implant cycling through standard decryption protocols, when the data flows suddenly lurched, not the smooth stream I was used to, but jagged, desperate bursts that made my temples throb. Something was fighting to surface. I pressed my palm against the mural's neglected corner, where the paint had started to bubble and crack. The surface felt warm, almost organic, and there was this smell, faint but unmistakable, like digital pigment decay mixed with ozone. You know that acrid scent when old storage drives overheat? It was seeping from the wall itself, as if the embedded data was literally rotting. My fingers traced the hairline fractures in the paint, and that's when I felt it. Microscopic variations in texture, invisible to the naked eye but detectable through my haptic sensors. The artist hadn't just hidden files in the visual spectrum, they'd encoded information in the physical structure of the pigment itself. Each crack, each bubble of decay, was a data point. The breakthrough came when I stopped thinking like a decoder and started thinking like a desperate artist with something to hide. They couldn't risk digital detection, so they'd gone analog, using the actual degradation of the paint as a storage medium. As the pigments broke down over centuries, they released their secrets in patterns that looked like natural aging. I activated my emergency backup systems and began mapping the decay patterns in 3 dimensions. The smell grew stronger, almost overwhelming, as my scanners heated up from processing the massive data streams. My hands were shaking, not from the neural load, but from what I was seeing unfold in real time. The pattern wasn't random. It was a molecular calendar, counting down the decades since the mural's creation. And embedded in that countdown was a second layer: financial records, communication logs, executive orders. All the evidence the artist had somehow obtained, compressed into the very atoms of their paint. But here's what made my blood freeze: the pattern was accelerating. The decay rate had spiked dramatically in the last 5 years, as if the data was trying to surface before it was too late. The artist had built in a failsafe: if the information wasn't discovered by a certain point, it would begin broadcasting itself through the chemical breakdown of the pigments. I was seeing the death throes of a 260-year-old confession, encoded by someone who knew they'd never live to see justice but refused to let the truth die with them. The mural was bleeding evidence, and I was the only one close enough to catch it before it evaporated into nothing. The data streams hit me like ice water. Transaction records from 2089, the year of the Great Substrate Collapse, scrolled across my neural interface faster than I could process. But I recognized the signature immediately: triple encrypted hexagonal clusters, each one wrapped in a fractal shell that dissolved after exactly 47.3 seconds of exposure to scanning light. Only one encryption artist in history had used that specific timing protocol. Kaya Voss. The ghost coder who'd vanished during the corporate trials of 2091. I pressed my palm against the wall, feeling the paint's texture shift under my touch as more data unlocked. The surface was warm now, almost feverish, as if the mural was running a temperature from the strain of releasing centuries of compressed information. My fingertips tingled with static discharge. The wall was literally electrified with data transfer. The financial records were devastating. Substrate manipulation schemes worth trillions of credits. Falsified safety reports that led to the deaths of entire orbital colonies. Executive communications discussing acceptable casualty rates for profit margins. All of it authenticated with quantum timestamps that would hold up in any court in the system. But as I absorbed more data, the gallery's ambient lighting began to shift. The soft, warm illumination that had been bathing the mural started to flicker, then gradually dimmed to an ominous amber. My enhanced vision caught the change immediately: someone was remotely adjusting the environmental controls. They knew I was here. They knew what I'd found. My hands were trembling as I tried to download everything, but Voss had been too clever. The data was keyed to my specific biometric signature now, only I could access it, and only while physically touching the wall. If I tried to copy it remotely, the encryption would collapse and take the evidence with it. The amber light deepened to red. Emergency protocols were activating throughout the building. I could hear the distant hum of security barriers engaging, sealing the exits. My breath came in short gasps as the reality hit me: I wasn't just witnessing history anymore. I was trapped inside it. The mural's surface grew hotter under my palm. More data flooded my consciousness: names, dates, locations of mass graves on mining asteroids. Corporate executives who'd ordered the execution of whistleblowers. Government officials who'd been bought and paid for with blood money. All of it flowing into my neural storage like molten metal, burning permanent pathways in my memory. I could smell ozone now, sharp and acrid, as my overloaded system sparked. The wall itself was beginning to smoke where my hand made contact. Voss had designed this as a one-time revelation. The act of reading the data was destroying it, ensuring no one else could ever access it again. The red lighting pulsed faster, matching my accelerated heartbeat. I was the sole inheritor of evidence that could topple governments, bankrupt corporations, and rewrite the history of human expansion into space. But I was also marked now. The moment I'd touched this wall, I'd become a target. Through the crimson haze, I saw movement in the gallery's entrance. Security drones, their optical sensors gleaming like predatory eyes in the emergency lighting. They moved with mechanical precision, but I could see the human operators behind their movements, corporate security, not gallery staff. The data transfer was almost complete, but my neural buffers were at critical capacity. I could feel synapses overloading, memories fragmenting under the strain of absorbing 2.5 centuries of compressed evidence. The smell of burning electronics filled my nostrils as my backup systems began to fail. Voss had left me one final gift embedded in the data stream, a message, personal and direct: if you're reading this, you're the last hope. Don't let them bury us again. The drones were closing in, their weapon systems charging with a high-pitched whine that cut through the gallery's silence. I had seconds to decide: try to escape with partial data, or stay and risk everything for the complete truth. I made the choice in that split second. I pressed my palm harder against the burning wall, feeling the neural pathways in my hand begin to fry as the last fragments of data poured into my cortex. The pain was excruciating, like having molten metal injected directly into my brain, but I held on. The drone's targeting lasers painted red dots across my chest, but they hesitated. Corporate protocol dictated they needed me alive for interrogation. That hesitation gave me the opening I needed. I triggered an emergency data relay to my internal storage cores, bypassing the failing neural buffers and dumping everything directly into my quantum memory banks. The process felt like swallowing lightning. Every synapse in my body convulsed as terabytes of evidence flooded my consciousness. I could taste copper in my mouth, feel blood trickling from my ears, but the transfer was complete. The system immediately screamed in protest: unauthorized data extraction detected, security breach imminent. Alarms shrieked through the gallery as blast shields began sealing the exits. But I was already moving, my legs carrying me toward the maintenance tunnels I'd mapped during my initial survey. The drones fired, their energy bolts scorching the air where I'd been standing, leaving smoking craters in the ancient walls. I dove through a ventilation grate just as the gallery's emergency lockdown engaged, sealing me into the building's skeletal infrastructure. The narrow passages were pitch black, filled with the acrid smell of ozone and burning circuitry from my overloaded systems. I crawled through dust and debris that hadn't been disturbed in decades, following maintenance routes toward the old transit tunnels beneath the city. Hours later, I emerged 3 kilometers away in an abandoned subway station, my clothes torn and my augmented system still sparking intermittently. The data sat heavy in my memory banks, not just files and documents, but the emotional weight of what I now knew. Voss hadn't just uncovered corporate malfeasance, they'd documented systematic genocide, the deliberate poisoning of entire colony worlds to drive down real estate prices, the assassination of whistleblowers spanning 2 centuries. I found myself standing in the gallery's empty hallway again 2 days later, officially reporting for my scheduled shift as if nothing had happened. The mural was gone, not painted over or removed, but molecularly dissolved, leaving only smooth wall where Voss's final masterpiece had been. The corporate cleaning crews had been thorough, erasing every trace of the artist's existence from the space. My supervisor handed me new assignments with a smile that didn't reach their eyes. They knew. Of course they knew. But they also knew that I knew they knew, creating a delicate balance of mutually assured destruction. As long as I continued my work quietly, analyzing harmless historical artifacts and filing sanitized reports, they would pretend the incident never occurred. But in the silence of that empty hallway, surrounded by walls that had once held truth and now held only lies, I made my decision. The data burned in my memory banks like a digital cancer, demanding release. Voss had died to preserve this evidence, had spent their final years encoding it into art because they knew traditional channels were compromised. I wouldn't let their sacrifice be meaningless. Tonight, when the city sleeps and the corporate monitoring systems cycle into low-power mode, I'll begin the transmission. Not to news networks or government agencies, they're all bought and paid for. But to you, living in your primitive but honest time, before the corporations learn to rewrite history in real time. The truth wants to be free, and sometimes the only way to honor the dead is to risk joining them.